Okay, I'm going to start in an unorthodox way by taking a picture of you all. This is such a joyous occasion.
I'm down
And I also want to start in an unorthodox way by applauding our 3 authors tonight for publishing their books. Welcome to Stony Brook, Manhattan. As many of you know, because you have children going to school, your adult children, we offer courses in creative writing, nonfiction, poetry, playwriting, screenwriting, filmmaking. I'm putting to the gear that we're about to bring out to Ronkonkoma. And we're so delighted to have the fruits of creativity celebrated tonight. We have 3 students all publishing, and you'll hear from them soon. Please welcome Victor Giannini to start.
Hi, I'm Victor Giannini, and I recently published Scott 2 through Silver Thought Press right before I got my MFA, so it was cool timing. I'm going to read 2 pieces. They go in sequential order, but not too far into the book. And so there's plenty of weird surprises left. And there's also plenty of foul language and intentional immaturity. So if that's not your thing, now's a good time to pretend you're going to the bathroom. And so these are the characters. They're all in their late 20s, and they're all kind of losers. Their lives are stagnant. There's the narrator named Scott Alvin, and he used to have an awesome life, and now he's hit a brick wall, and he's obsessed with a girl named Trish, who kind of represents the kind of girl that used to fall all over him. And then there's Jace, who's Scott's best friend and roommate, and he tattoos underage girls, sells weed, and can just kind of deal with anything. And finally we have Scott 2, who's a real, actual flesh and blood person who's a total copy of Scott, and he's living out the life that Scott Alvin thinks he wants to live out. So where we are at this point is Scott Alvin has survived a drive-by, and Scott 2 has shown up, and they got really baked and drunk trying to deal with it and figure it out, and Scott fell asleep on the couch. Jason Scott 2 stayed up all night, and Scott just was like, I had enough. The sunlight crept through the blinds, waking me way too early at 2 p.m. I was still on the couch, but alone. Thank God, it was all just a nightmare. I went upstairs and took my weekly shower, I even shaved, and the thoughts of last night's near-death experience and weird demon clones evaporated on the mirror. And I got dried off and thinking, a second me? Ridiculous, what a stupid idea. And then I got downstairs and saw something truly strange. Jace was back in his chair, awake at 3 p.m. and drinking, but not beer. Hey Jace, what's good? Nothing. I have to drink this shit just to stay awake so I can go to work later. He burped, shaking the can. It was purple and neon yellow and the size of a sawed-off shotgun. Its label loudly proclaimed that it was turbo-juiced malt liquor, 15% alcohol with taurine, caffeine, neoprene, guarana extract, red number 40, and guaranteed to drive you loco. He threw it against the wall. Seriously, bro, that shit tastes like the flu. How the hell did you sleep through all that? Beers and blunts and... Wait, sleep through what? Scott 2 is a pain in the ass. Oh no. No, this is really happening? He just kept ranting all night, like you. And he was like talking about quantum this and that, and inverted gods, and synthetic devils, and Jace pinched his eyes. I mean, he's cool, but fucking manic little pixie freak. I wanted to strangle him. Okay, thanks. I sat down, trying not to throw up and digest that this was really happening. Bro, don't you think this is kind of weird? Jace packed his bong. Hell yeah, I think it's weird. So then, wait, where'd you get that drink? Down at the bodega. So it's still open? Was Trish there? Yes, he said patiently. Well, where is it? It's down the street where it's always been, dumbass. No shit, Jace. Where's Scott 2? I don't know, I woke up and after I finally passed out and he was gone. He's not a pet. Well, he's not in your room? No, it's definitely not in my room. So I guess he's not here, genius. He lit 2 cigarettes and a joint and opened a beer and kept them all for himself. I spun away to hide my face, thinking, good God, my imposter clone or whatever is not only real, it's out in public doing God knows what, wearing my face. And the door slammed, and there he was, my living mirror, arching his back and yawning. Where have you been? I demanded. Out skating, chilling, living. You can't do that. Why not? Because it's my life. Every time you go out, I have to keep track of what you do and pretend I'm you. He stared at me and said, so what, you want a friggin' checklist? I don't know what. I fell onto the couch. I want him gone. I wanted to just say that I wanted myself gone. And then I looked at him and he said, you want to come next time? But I know that face. It's the same face I use when I lie. So I answered, no, I don't want there to be a next time. And I want to know what you did with Trish. Oh, busted, Jace said. He sat back, chugging his beer. Clone fight, my money's on you? He pointed at both of us. It's very funny, thanks. All right, enough. What did you do with Trish? I chopped her up and put her in a bag. She's outside in the garbage. 7 hells, Scott, I'm trying to help you. Impersonating me and stealing my girl is hell? Whoa, 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 he said. First of all, she's not your girl at all in any way. Second of all, right, she's your girl now? No, he palmed his face. Man, she thinks we're a loser. Then he sat down next to me, shoulder to shoulder, and I looked at him. Are we? Hey, you're getting there, amigo, Jace said. Or amigos, whatever. Scott too smiled, all teeth but no eyes. Not for long. He bounded up the stairs before I could react to my room. I heard heavy grunting. I was afraid to peer around the corner and find myself playing with myself. But it was weirder. He was doing push-ups. What are you doing? Push-ups. Yeah, I know, but why? Well, because we're skinny and weak, Scott too said. I asked Trish if she had a boyfriend, something you never did, by the way. And it turns out she does. There's some dickhead over at the Korova, and she's not that into him, but he's really buff. So I figured, start making some changes. Okay, stop. Tell me everything you did with Trish, and I'll consider not, he paused. Not what? Kicking my ass? You better start doing some push-ups too if you want that to happen. He smiled through every rise and fall, and I watched, tired, pissed, and scared. But Scott too was happy. So now we jump ahead a few chapters, and all you need to know is that Scott too is now increasingly going out in public whenever he wants, causing a lot of trouble for Scott Alvin, and Scott and Jace kidnap and drug him so that Jace can put a little tattoo on them to differentiate them in a worst-case court scenario. Scott too is very angry and has told them that he's now renamed himself Rex because he finds the old identity weak. Waking up with an arm wrapped around me was so wonderful. It'd been so long. Someone pulling you in tight and close and keeping you both warm and... Wait a second. I jumped right out of my bed. What's wrong? Rex asked. He was lying face down on the other half of my bed, his arms still stretched out where I'd been, and drooling on my vintage Rockstar the Barbarian pillow. Get out of my bed, Rex. Oh, where am I supposed to sleep? Scott? The couch, the floor with Jace? I don't care. I pushed him aside, but it was actually kind of tough. And as I tried to roll back to sleep, it loomed over my face. Rex's arm, completely covered in saran wrap. He twisted it mockingly. By the way, Scott, nice idea last night. Oh God, what did Jace do to you? Exactly what you asked, he said. He pushed me out of the bed, laughing like an older brother. Bang, bang, bang. Jace's door didn't open. Bang, bang, it ripped open. Jace was there, bloodshot, ready to kill. Jesus fucking Christ, man, did we just stop sleeping in this house? What the fuck is it? The tattoo, that's what the fuck? What were you thinking? His eyes peeled open and he smiled. Huh, yeah, dude, that's a sharktopus. What the hell is a sharktopus? It's friggin' sweet, that's what it is. Didn't you see that movie? It's classic. It's like half shark, half octopus, and totally badass. I got the tentacles wrapping all up around his forearm and his elbow, and the shark's mouth is open at the wrist, and I shaded it in real nice. Exactly. Real nice, you moron. You covered his entire arm. Yeah? Well, this moron did it for free, don't you forget that. He cracked a beer. Dude, I wanted you to give him something discreet. I told you, just like a simple number 2 on his back, insurance in a worst case scenario in case of Rex or whatever does something terrible. So yes, good job. Now you can tell us apart. All the friggin' time. He doesn't even need to hide now. He can run free and steal the rest of my life because of the giant fucking sharktopus covering his arm. Jay spit his beer can, looking down. Yeah, buddy. Whoops. I don't know, bro. You left and we got all tore up on my stash and got inspired, you know, and Rex thought it'd be a pretty hardcore idea. Rex thought, huh? Fucking hell. I spun around, pulling at my hair. Dude, I wanted to contain him. Now he's too different. He can run free with my past, my memories, and my face. And what are we gonna do? We can't afford plastic surgery. I slid down the door frame, pulling my hair. I'm gonna have to wear long sleeve shirts all summer. Jace crouched down, put a cigarette in my mouth, and lit it for me. Chill out, bro. Just tell Rex to. Yeah, like Rex is gonna listen to me, I said. I shot my finger up before he could speak. And no, I'm not getting the same tattoo. I'm the real Scott. I don't have to change. I hung my head, chewing my lip, trying to make it bleed. Jace stood up, accidentally ashing his cigarette in my hair. He stared into the distance, his arms crossed, tapping his foot, and scratching his ass. And I watched him pontificate while slowly banging my head on the door frame. And then he looked down at me. What? I demanded. And he shrugged. Well, could just kill him. Thank you. Next up is my fellow MFA colleague, Michael LoCurto.
Thank you, Victor. Your fiction was impressive. Congrats to Scott, too. Thank you. And yes, I'm Michael LoCurto. Tonight I'll be reading from my novel and MFA thesis, To See. But first, quickly, I'd like to thank the MFA Southampton and Manhattan community, and I'm also proud to be alongside Victor and Judy tonight. And I guess for what I'm reading tonight, all you need to know is that John Brand is a Long Island fisherman struggling with a famine of fish. Elia is his wife of 25 years. Barry is his 16-year-old son, and the Brands live next door to a Greek Orthodox church. Enjoy. The grass had greened from a dormancy of a winter's brown, now soft to the touch, long and overgrown, and hugging the asphalt roadside, where parishioners parked car after car, lining the thin road for the Sunday morning service, all slamming doors, all walking up the dewy grass to the tolling church. John jumped from the bed. He threw the blankets off his chest, and he glanced over at the digital clock flashing 9:22. He looked over at Elliot. She was wrapped around several blankets. Her soft face cushioned a small indentation into the pillow. He shifted his weight aside her, hanging his arms around her waist. His hand grabbed at her stomach. A smooth exhalation escaped his lips as his head fell back into the pillow. He wanted to hear his wife, the woman he loved, sigh relief into his ears. He wanted to set his fingertips into her skin. He wanted to feel her blood pump with his. There was a great deal of things he wanted to do, things he had not done in some time. John, she moaned, leave me alone. Sundays are my only days to sleep in. No stories on TV today, only cartoons and those boring political shows. But the cars, though, they woke me up. And we hadn't had sex in, he paused. I can't remember how long. 8 months and 2 weeks, Sean, that's how long, she reported, not once opening her eyes, throwing the blankets up over her head. John, leave me alone. You can't force these things. Her body sunk into the mattress. John sat up, and he distanced himself from Elliot. He dangled his feet over the side of the bed, looking over his shoulder out the bedroom window. You could see the oaks take to their full green. The sun began to film the horizon. The sound small waves pummeled the shoreline, then eased back into the sea. His thin lips coiled upwards. He shoved his feet into his boots and he headed out to the back porch. Elliot remained in the bed, without turning to him, without questioning his whereabouts, without opening her eyes. John pushed the porch swing slowly. The swing creaked loud against the waves. White bubbles foamed to the edges of the shore where the gentle wind blew the sea suds up into the air. John grabbed the swing. The creak stopped, and the sea roared in over the land. He watched the waves and the trees and the world swing all before him. He walked around the swing, tracing the wooden backing with his long fingers before he sat. Occasionally he kicked at the porch to rush into the air, but he mainly just thought. He thought of the sea and where he fit in with it. He knew he loved it. He most definitely knew that, but he didn't know how or when it would all fit together. John kicked the porch hard, jolting the swing into uneven sway. He jumped to his feet, leaning up over the railing. He looked out to the horizon. You see the image of Elliot dancing atop the low white waves. She was clothed in a shapely blue dress. Her hair took the motion of the waves crashing down onto her shoulders. He smiled, remembering in glimpses all the time she was all to himself. He reached over the porch, joining her hands into his own. They danced across the dark blue sea. "Pa," Barry called out through the screen door. "What are you doing?" Barry stared at his father dancing on the porch by himself. John stopped moving, quickly pushing his hands down to his sides, straightening out the seams on his pants. He lifted his head, and he cleared his throat. "Son," he finally said, "you're up quite early." Barry flipped his phone open, looking down at it. "It's 10:29, 10:30, it's not too early." Barry pushed the screen door open, letting the metal crash back into the frame. "What are you doing out here? Did you eat yet?" "No, I haven't. I just came out here for a little air, finally getting some warm mornings. No more frost from here on out." "Well, that's good." John rested his hand on Barry's shoulders. Then the man lifted his hand to Barry's right cheek, rubbing over the boy's high cheekbone. Then John brought his hand back down to his son's shoulder. "You know, son, life comes at you from all directions," he said. "All of a sudden you'll find yourself swept up by a rogue wave. Before you know it, you're beached, face down in the sand." John slid his hands into his pockets and forced a grin at his son. Barry smiled back, shielding the sun from his eyes with a hand above his brow. "Pa, I know you're hard on your luck, but don't sweat it. It can only get better. The seas can't stay dry forever. That's just impossible. The fish will surely return soon. They just have to." Barry relaxed his stance. He forced John's hands from his pockets, interlacing them with his own. John tried to sustain the grin plastered across his face, but he failed, and his lips quivered back down to an angled frown. "Thanks, son." But that's all John could say. He wanted to tell him about Monroe. He wanted to tell him about Elliot. He wanted to tell him about the sea, but he could not bring himself to. So he waited, staring out at the bright blue sea, just watching the waves press on. "You want to head out for a walk?" Barry spoke soft. "Out along the shore? It's quite the day for it, if I don't say so myself." The boy started down the steps, tugging on John's jacket to follow. "Come on, Pa, let's go," he called. John smiled, this time a natural grin. Barry jogged to the small strip of rocks before the sand met the low tide waves. He bent over, rummaging through the stones till he raised a flat 10 on the size of a $50, and then the boy ran back to his father, placing the rock in the man's hand. "I bet I can skip one farther than you." John closed his hand over the cold stone, petting the smooth surface with the tips of his fingers. "I bet you can," he yelled up at Barry, who sprinted back to the break. John chased after him. Then John tilted his shoulder to the side and he hurled the stone, skipping it 8 times along the flat sea. "Beat that," he snarled. Barry picked up several rocks, inspecting them with great detail before he flung one that bounced twice, then sunk out of sight. That's what you get when you can test a professional rock skipper, John laughed. He pointed his chin to the sea, allowing the breeze to blow in his neck. Then he reached his arm around Barry's chest, locking his left hand around his right wrist, squeezing his son in for a great hug. "Pa," Barry wheezed, "you're choking me." John let loose some slack in his grip, sliding his hand off his wrist to clasp hands before he broke the grip entirely, sliding his hands across Barry's head. "I love you, son," he said, in a relaxed tone that seemed almost foreign. The grunt rasp of his voice was gone, and a subtle cheer tailed the ends of each word. The two walked for a ways, taking in the hum and the small crashes beside them. The sun's golden rays kissed the two men brightly. John could not wipe the smile from his face if he had tried. His mind was cleared from the toxins that had poisoned him for the last few months. He felt alive, 100-fold. He watched himself reflect off the water in ripples of light and sea foam as 3 gulls fluttered overhead, crying with emptied stomachs before they settled upon the calm sea a few yards from the break. "You hungry?" John asked his son. "Yeah, I could go for some grub. I'm sure Mom put the bacon and the eggs on by now. She must be furious with us for leaving like that. You know how she gets." John stopped. He dug his boots into the wet sand. He called after Barry. He started for home. "Barry," his voice had lost all jubilance, returning back to the grunted monotone. "I think I should tell you something about Elliot." He paused. "I mean your mother." Barry stopped, turning back towards his father. The tide had come in now, gliding up over Barry's shoes, and he sunk into the shore. "Your mother has been unfaithful to me, and to you. I followed her to a motel a few months back when she was supposed to meet Margie for lunch. Couldn't be, Pa. I wouldn't do something like that. I'm sure she can explain." "It's true, believe me, son." I didn't want to believe it either. One of the gulls on the sea cawed. Another flew closer to land. John shifted his vision and with it his mind briefly away to the sea. "Believe it, Barry." The boy walked slowly up the bank of rocks. He immersed his hands into the stony shoreline, grabbing as many rocks as his fist could fit. Then he darted back to the water, falling ankle deep into the shallow sound as he threw the fistful of stones into the calm of the sea. The 2 gulls farthest from the shore caught and flew out of the path of the hurled rocks out toward the horizon. The closer gull remained, still, and was struck with a flurry of stones. The lone gull squawked loudly, then it fell to the side, head underwater. "I don't believe you," Barry yelled, now throwing fistfuls of sand into the sea, at the dead gull. "You're a liar. You're a useless father, and you can't even get a job to support us. If she did do it, I don't blame her. You're a useless man. You can't even live off the sea forever." Barry sniffed. "You need to grow up and do what's right for us. Stop thinking for yourself for once." Barry walked out of the water, brushing his caked-up sand hands along his thighs. "I know you're angry, but you need to understand." "Understand what? That our family is falling apart? What else is there to understand?" Barry's eyes narrowed. "Listen, Barry Brand, you need to grow up. The world is an immense place, and you haven't had a clue of how it works." John's brow wrinkled. Shadows caught in the troughs. Shine sweat gleamed in the crests. "You're going to wind up being a fisherman like me, like your grandfather. I fought with this concept in my head for a long while now, and can no longer fight it. Barry, the way I figure it, you aren't made out for college. You aren't made out for the indoors. You were made for the sea." John petted the whiskers under his nose, then he shoved his hands into his pockets. "You're a brand, Barry, and the sea is your calling." John paused for a moment, looking over to his son, the boy's legs soaked with sea. "You are the reason this family is drowning. It isn't me. It isn't her. It's you. And you need to fix things right quick, or I will." Barry's voice was shallow. It held a low undertone. His blue eyes turned a light gray, throwing no hope into fire and water. The dead gull washed ashore, the tide pushing the bird to arrest the soles of Barry's shoes. He looked down at the stilled thing, kicked it over face down, and then he turned on the sea and he headed back to the house. John's eyes teared as he stared up at the bell now tolling up in the steeple. "Barry," he shouted up ahead. "Wait, let's go to church. The next service is starting. Let's go." Barry stopped. He walked towards his father slowly. "We haven't been to church since I made my communion. Besides, that church isn't even our church. They speak old Greek in there." Barry's face cringed, showing wrinkles along the sides of his cheeks. "I'm not going," he said, and walking back to the house. "Barry, wait." Barry stopped again, turning. "What?" "Let's just go for the love. All churches are a fellowship of love. Let's just go in and relax." "No, I'm hungry. Let me go see if Mom put the eggs on." Barry continued with a slow saunter through the swish of the tumbling rocks. John stood beside the lifeless gull. I'm sorry, little guy, you need to excuse my son, he said. He watched Barry walk down the banked stones, up the yard of tall grass, to the back porch before he disappeared behind the door to the kitchen. John signaled the sign of the cross over the gull, whispering the Lord's Prayer up until he forgot the verses. He tugged on his beard, then he shuffled his feet through the sand till he reached the church. He paused at the steps, looking up at the stained glass Greek Jesus. He signed the cross over the man's glass heart, and he walked through his fellowship of love. Thank you.
Before I begin, I just wanted to congratulate Victor on SCA2 and Michael on to see they are amazing accomplishments. So congratulations, guys. But tonight, I'm here to talk a little bit about our next reader, Judy Mandel. The first time I was introduced to Judy Mandel, we were working on getting her prepared to join the MFA community here at Stony Brook, Manhattan, as a student via Skype. I realized immediately that she is one of the most generous writer friends one could have, because on that first day, she sent me a full handful of emails. Damn, she's persistent, I thought. Then immediately realized this is only a very small part of her brilliance. See, this was 2010. And shortly after her self-published memoir, Replacement Child, began finding success. She had tried the traditional publishing route, soliciting agents to approach publishers, but several thought her book would have trouble finding an audience. So, rather than hanging her head and putting that manuscript away in a drawer, Judy did what every respectable writer should do. She set about proving them all wrong. Putting her journalism and corporate communication background to work, she brushed up on her book marketing and advertising skills, created her own imprint, and hired an editor, a designer, and an online marketer. She embarked on a nationwide book tour and a blog tour. The book, Replacement Child, won a Writer's Digest Award and a National Indie Excellence Award. And in July of 2011, while Judy herself was preoccupied with back surgery, Replacement Child became the Barnes & Noble featured book of the month. It was only a matter of time before an outfit like Barnes & Noble found Judy's book. With prose that are heartbreakingly honest and breathtakingly vivid, Judy takes the reader on the journey through the horrible plane crash that took her sister's life, her mother and father's grief, and her other sister's lifetime of recovery from the burns she sustained. All the while, Judy reveals the complex relationship she has with all of them as the replacement child, the salve to the burns of loss. A few months after Barnes & Noble made Judy's book the featured book of the month, while she was still recovering from her surgery, she realized that large sums of money were being deposited into her bank account. The joys of automatic deposits. And after a bit of investigation, she realized she was selling well over 4,000 copies a month. It was then that she contacted agent Rita Rosencrantz, whom she had approached previously, and Rita quickly sold Replacement Child to Seal Press. Over the past few months, as Replacement Child came upon its pub date, Judy's powerful voice of growth and awareness has been heard in such places as Jane Friedman's wide-reaching blog, Jane Friedman Reading, Writing, and Publishing in the Digital Age, Psychology Today, the American Society of Journalists and Authors, and Writer's Digest. So, don't ever let anyone tell you that it can't be done, because here with us tonight is the woman who did. I am proud to introduce my friend, our student, and published author, Judy Mandel.
I don't think I have to do anything now. First, I want to thank you all for coming. This is really wonderful. I see so many great friends, new friends, old friends, and thank you. And thank you to Stony Brook too. It's been wonderful. And I see some friends I didn't think that were going to make it tonight. Hi. So I'm going to read just one short chapter, and I guess we're all going to have a Q&A after that. And I'm not going to give you anything to set this up because it's already been set up, so we're all set. I always knew that my family was formed out of the blue. My version of the stork. Only this stork exchanged a life for a life, had an engine and silver wings. I learned the details in dribs and drabs, never the whole story. At first I thought it was only a fire that took away my sister. And I wondered for a long time, what started the blaze? The word accident was most often used. And I was left to wonder what it meant. Before the accident, I would hear my mother say on the phone, or after the accident. It was a way to tell time. But somehow I knew everything they didn't tell me. I felt the pain of my family without knowing why. A subconscious link informed me of the depth of lingering grief, bitterness, and anger. I intuited the pain they felt in watching Linda go through so much physical and psychological turmoil. I understood their investment in me, but also my father's hesitance. My sister Linda was hurt. I knew that because she went into the hospital every year to get something fixed or reconstructed. But she didn't look different to me. In fact, I only noticed her scars when others reacted to them. The first time I remember understanding she was different was at Goodman's Deli when I was 6 or 7. We'd go there with my father for hot pastrami on rye with a little mustard for me, corned beef on rye for Linda, egg creams and fries, of course. When we sat down, I noticed a little boy in the booth across the aisle staring at Linda. I watched as she tried not to pay attention, but I saw her glance at him, then look back down at her menu. I knew only that I wanted to protect her from that boy before his hurtful words could leave even more scars. I stared him down until he dropped his gaze. After that, I tried to force myself to look at Linda with new eyes, to see what others saw. It wasn't easy to do. I didn't know her any other way, but I made myself study the worst scars. Most of the bottom half of her face down her neck had raised red scar tissue. Both of her ears were gone, though her hearing was fine. Her left arm and leg were badly burned, wrapped tight, tough, brownish red, where the skin had burned down to the muscle. Before she started wearing makeup as a teenager, the scars on her face drew attention away from her wide green Betty Davis eyes, which were, in fact, beautiful. The flames had seared the skin under her cheekbone, collared her neck, and descended down her chest. At some point, as I got older, I started listening more carefully to snippets of conversations to grasp the entirety of the story of the accident. The extended family always talked as if the details were well known, and there was no need to bring up something that was so painful, and certainly never to mention Donna's name. My father especially never uttered it, except that I wasn't there. Even when there was some talk about it, it would stop when I walked in the room. It felt like a conspiracy to keep me separate. Something told me I should not ask questions. I might break the spell and disappear. I remember being stunned when I first heard it had been an airplane that crashed and burned in my mother's kitchen. I'm sure she was telling the story to a new friend on the phone when I overheard her. When I asked her about it, she seemed just as surprised that I didn't already know. You know about the accident, Judy, right? The plane crash. Your sister is burned. As if it were all as plain as the nose on my face. And then hearing my mother tell stories about her pregnancies, the way that women tell their hard stories about birth, I was shocked to hear there were 3. All 3 of my babies were big, she'd say. My first was over 10 pounds, but she came easily. Linda was another story. She had a hard time. She didn't want to be born. They had to dislocate her shoulders to get her out. My parents must have had some kind of unspoken agreement not to dwell on the accident. Maybe when I was born, they developed this pact to put it all behind them and go on with this new life, just another reconstructive surgery. Then there were the stories told time and again, meant to bring me into the family drama since I came in during Act 2. But mostly they reinforced the central focus of my family, my sister. There was the bus story, The doctor told my parents that they needed to get Linda out in public soon after the accident so she could get used to reactions she might get from people and learn how to deal with them. The plan was to take a city bus from the apartment to downtown Elizabeth, walk a few blocks to my father's jewelry store, and all go out for lunch. It was Linda's first public exposure since the crash, but on the way she fell on some loose stones and split open the fragile scar tissue on her knee. Just then the bus pulled up. They took seats near the bus driver, and when my mother pulled some tissues from her purse to dab at the bloodied knee, she noticed a woman staring intently at Linda. What happened to her? What did you do to her? My mother took a moment to pull herself together and think about what to say. But I really couldn't help myself, she said, when she told the story. I turned to her and said, she was in an accident. An airplane crashed into my house, killed my other daughter, and my baby here is lucky to be alive. Do you have any more questions I can answer for you right now? That woman didn't have a thing to say for the rest of that ride. My father told about taking Linda to her first Thanksgiving Day parade. I was just 6 months old, at home while my mother cooked dinner. He told Linda she would see the Shriners in their little hats and their tiny cars whizzing around. He prepared her for the loud sirens and music so that she wouldn't be afraid. At the parade, shiny new fire trucks showed off their bells and sirens, clanging in time with the tubas and the high school band, local royalty room convertibles waving and throwing wrapped candy to the children that lined the streets. The Boy and Girl Scouts were flanked by the Little League and the Daughters of the American Revolution. They found a spot in front of Levy Brothers department store, out of the wind and cold, to watch the parade. My father bought a red balloon from a street vendor, and Linda was happily clutching it when a little boy approached her, pointing into her smiling face, and squealed, "Ew, what happened to you?" Linda burst into tears. The boy's mother dragged him away with a shake of her head. My father scooped up Linda quickly to hug her, trying to control her sobs. Honey, don't ever forget that some people are pretty on the outside and ugly on the inside. You're just wearing your badge of courage on the outside, and you should always wear it with pride. These were the kinds of stories that filled in the gaps for me as a child. They gave me the definition of what our family was about. I was not a lead actor in this play. When I wanted to go on a trip to Florida with my friends in high school, I learned more about the actual crash. Our family did not fly. My parents had only recently taken their first airplane ride on a business trip, and Linda had never flown. To boot, my flight was scheduled on American Airlines, the very carrier that crashed a plane into their home. I was 16 years old and totally oblivious to the ramifications of their putting me on that particular plane by myself. They gritted their teeth and let me go. Thank you.
I'd like to invite the three authors to come up and sit. Okay.
I don't know.
Is it on? Okay, now it's on. So one thing I find interesting about the three of us being here tonight is we've had three very different paths towards publishing, a couple of which didn't even exist when I got my BA. So first question, how'd you guys do it? And I'll wait till the end.
Well, that was a
Oh, we know
tricky
yours,
thing
but-
to do, wasn't it?
I could start if you'd like, but I think you just heard the story. Suzanne told us the story, which was a great synopsis, I think, of what happened to me. And, you know, the fact was I didn't want to give up, and I thought the book was worth getting out there and believed in it. And that's why I first self-published it.
Well, I find that great because, A, you can't make a living as an artist if you give up, ever. You just have to, you know, after like, what, the 300th rejection, it stops making any pain and you get numb to it. But what you did was different than what a lot of other people do now. Like, they just self-publish and they don't put any heart or effort into it. They do it just because they can. And as I just learned from Susanna, like you really like kind of went out there, similar to how you did, which I'm going to ask you in a second. And then were picked up by a publisher, and that's pretty much everyone's self-publishing. That's their dream. So congratulations on that. And thank you. My story's a little different, but Michael, how'd you do it?
I really just wanted to write a novel and then have the artistic direction based on what my friends and I really wanted to put forth, and have a true example of how I felt this story should be told through my vision and through my friend's vision, through my friend Sean Hudson painting, an oil painting, and then did all the graphic arts for it. So we were really just looking to have complete control over our whole process. And then we go from there.
Did you self-publish first?
Yeah, we self-published.
Actually, similar to you, my best friend did the artwork for mine, which ironically his name is Scott, but it's not him in the book. It's me that's the loser. He's a pretty great guy. It's the cover art he did. I asked him to do kind of like a 1970s European edition of a sci-fi novel, and I think he nailed it. It's Scott Myers. You should check his work out for sure. The way I got published, I was taking a class at the Southampton campus with Roger Rosenblatt, and it was a novella class. And well, I wrote the whole thing there, and when we were done, I was taking 2 classes with him at the time. It was the novella and the nonfiction one. And he liked the novella, he didn't really like the nonfiction one. I remember being in his office, and I was kind of scared. If any of you have met Roger, you know it can be exhilarating or terrifying. And he said, "How did you write this? And write this?" And he just threw the nonfiction down, but he urged me to try to get it published, so I did. And I queried about 50 or 60 agents and small publishers, you know, expecting to then do 100 more. And I got contacted by the editor-in-chief of Silver Thought Press. And I'd worked with them before on anthologies and such, so I knew their level of commitment to marketing and design and the support. And it was very strange. I just got, you know, about 50 rejections, and all of a sudden they were like, "Can we publish this?" I read it right now, and I was like, "Yes, you can publish it, thanks." And it took a long time between editing and designing, and it finally came out December of 2012, like right before I got my MFA, which was kind of neat. That was it. That was a pretty long story, but that's basically it. Does anyone in the audience have questions?
I've read, I think, only one of your short stories, but I know like you tend to publish mainly short stories, and I found Scott too very different from the approach you took from only one of the stories I read. What were some of the differences that you took from a short story as far as like introducing this like sci-fi concept to the reader?
Well, a lot of my work, which I can guess which one you read, is pretty dark and messed up. And I'm not saying that Scott too isn't, you know, but I didn't know where this story was going to go. Roger basically said, write 6 pages a week and don't stop and don't go back and edit. And so I did that, and I wrote it so that I wanted my classmates to want that 7th page. So it made me write at a different pace and really cut down on all of my flowery showing off type stuff. And it got the book done like by the end of the class. So then I went back to re-edit it, and instead of having to do 200 drafts, I only had to do like 199. And basically, it didn't end the way I thought it would. I was like, I want to talk about this state our generation's in. We're like, you know, for my generation, 30 is what 20 was for like my parents or grandparents. And it's nothing to do with the economy or politics. It's just this strange, life is getting longer as usual. There used to not be a word for teenager, and I just looked at myself and other people I knew and thought, I'm gonna take the worst of it, mush it together, and then see what happens when someone has a chance to live with their better self. And I was very surprised with where it went. So that process, it wasn't meticulously planned out, it was an experiment.
And,
Michael, are you an East Ender, and did the story come from a relationship with the sea? And can you just talk a little bit about your process?
Yeah, I would have to say that my process of the novel is really based on a love for the sea. And I really wanted to show the main character, who's a fisherman, have a whole novel based around him never going into the water. So, like, I have him traveling all over the coast and different little scenes. That each scene, Long Island has many different coastal beaches that are all completely different from one another. And I wanted to show the significance to that on someone's psyche, who always sees land from a distance when they're on a boat, but how they deal with that concept of being on land and they can't get off the land. Does that answer?
It might seem a little particular, because it's only a few words that I'm focusing on. When Barry, the son, correct, said, they just gotta, referring to the fish or the livelihood coming in from the sea that the father relies on. It's weird because I heard it and it sounded really sincere, but after I thought about it, I was like, I think I've heard that like a million times. But it's odd because we're always kind of told to keep away from cliches, but maybe there's, did you think?
Cliches I always think are fun.
Yeah.
Because it's almost like a nod, I feel, to the person who's reading it. You can then relate that short little sentence that might even be a fragment. They can relate that to 10 or 15 other things that they've read before.
Yeah, I can't name them,
Exactly.
but as soon as it sounded, as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, that sounds sincere. And then I was like, wait,
I'm glad I got you thinking.
yeah.
I'm wondering about your writing processes. Victor just talked about the 6 pages a week and not going back. How did you guys, the other 2 panelists?
Well, once I decided that I was going to actually write this, I set myself a schedule, actually in the mornings, and at least for 3 or 4 hours I would write. And what I did was I wrote about whatever incident was in my mind, because I was trying to dredge up real memories, which turned out to be harder than I thought it was going to be. And it turned out also that I couldn't really write about something that I didn't want to write about at the moment. But I did make myself write about something. That's what I did. I kept on a schedule. And I realized that after 1 o'clock, I was writing not very good. So I knew I had to do it in the morning, and that was the best time to do it.
That's really illuminating, because to talk about like family tragedy, which I know a lot of writers in this room probably are grappling with, and to think about how to do it, how to go there, and then come back out and be okay.
And a lot of those pieces didn't get into the book,
Yeah.
but it kept me moving.
Cool.
I would say I filled the marble notebook up with all my ideas and how I would want characters to play out in different dynamics and how to try to craft nature as a character. And that took a long time in my head to try to figure out how to do that, so I really wanted to learn how to do it before I started writing. So I spent about 2-3 months trying to craft how to make it, and then I started writing.
I'd also like to say about Michael, we've had a lot of emails organizing this event, and he's the only person who responded at 4:30 a.m. 5 a.m.
Yeah, we can really.
Well, can you talk about that a little more, like how you filled up that notebook with ideas, like?
Yeah, all right. I'll write on, I guess, the right side. The right side, I'll leave the left side empty. So I'll write how I want things to progress. So an earlier notebook will be very basic layout of how I want things to progress chapter-wise. And then I'll do another notebook that will be more detailed, but with enough room to play around. So I'll leave the whole left side empty. So then when I'm writing, I'll just glance at my notes that I'm going through. So everything changes, it's not set in stone. It's not like my characters are acting to like what I'm writing, what I've written down initially. But it's all little ideas. So like the story's been developed 3 times over before I started writing. So it keeps enhancing itself.
Yeah.
Or hopefully.
Yeah.
And did you write any of that in a class? Did you start any
I
of that?
brought this
Oh, you
into
brought it
the
with you?
MFA,
Okay.
yeah. And then I worked it in MFA and outside as a boy.
Judy, when you were writing in those 3 hours or every single day, and you came up with all these memories, and I'm assuming you were on your computer or whatever, you know, and then you, at some point, probably found yourself with this big basket of,
Yes.
you know, then, what did you think then? It was like, the what?
She had a hallway.
I had a hallway of stuff. Yeah, you're right. Finish your
You
question,
know,
sorry.
the question is then what? It's like, and then you've got to sort through and decide what to keep, what to expand, how you're gonna, did the focus naturally come into, did it come into focus as you had all of these memories?
It came into focus several times in different ways.
Yeah.
And finally, I was really about a year into the writing when I came upon the term replacement child. And that changed the whole focus of the book, really. And then, you know, because I found out that it was a real term, a psychological term that was quoted in 1964 by a team, Kane and Kane, who were doing research with Holocaust survivors' children. And so once I started to relate to that and identify with that term, it changed the theme of the book. And it helped me weed out the pieces that didn't work, and it helped me come up with, you know, a focus. I know Magdalene was talking about the hallway, and I had index cards of each chapter, and I had bulletin boards lining my hallways, and I would change them, and you know, to see what worked and what didn't work, and so I took over the house, and you know, my husband put up with it.
Judy, can you talk about your decision to self-publish and after your agent search, and like how you didn't get discouraged?
Well, let me think about that for a second. I gave myself a year, is what I did. And I went to writers' conferences, and I met people, and I met agents, and I talked to agents that I liked, and I sent them queries, and I had quite a few requests for partials of the book, even the entire book. And what kept coming back was, I like this, I like the story, I like the writing, but I don't think I can sell this book. In fact, the agent that I do have now had a similar book, I think, or a similar theme, something like that, a memoir that she was having a hard time with. And so I gave myself a deadline of a year, and after the year of rejections, I decided that I wasn't getting any younger, and and I wanted to publish it. And that's when I decided to self-publish, and I looked at the self-publishing, you know, companies, and decided that since I had a background in marketing, that I could do that myself. So, sure. Questions?
Judy, did you publish your book before coming in the program?
I did.
What were your main reasons for coming in the program?
I wanted to keep writing,
Yeah.
and I wanted to keep learning, and the program's been wonderful for that. So I'm not even a graduate. I'm still a student. Yes.
Book obviously deals with painful issues, and so when you're writing this book for such a long time, you're grappling for a very long time, very painful, difficult emotional issues. What effect did it have on you to continuously deal with something this difficult?
That's a really good question. It was not easy. It really wasn't easy, especially since I was kind of dredging things up that I hadn't thought about and hadn't realized the impact as I was going through it. I have to say I cried a lot, but I also laughed a lot because these people were in my head. My parents were, their voices were in my head, my sister's voice was in my head, and so it was exhausting. But you're right, it is difficult. And even now, with the book coming out again, I find that I'm there again with them, which is happy and sad at the same time. But it certainly does put you right in touch with it, and I actually think it's been good. It's been a good journey in that way.
I want to know how liberal are you with dialogue, because I know memoir kind of, it's nonfiction, but it's a little bit of a gray area as I remember it. But I know some people that even deal with memoirs, they will not put down dialogue unless, they record it right afterwards or it's been recorded. How much space do you feel like you have to move around in dialogue, especially before you consider it?
I wrote plenty of dialogue that I obviously was not present to hear. But I knew the stories and I knew the people. And I feel like the dialogue was what they would say. I knew, the situation. So I guess I was pretty liberal with that. So.
And for Victor, when you're doing sci-fi, do you tend to come up with an idea and try to figure out how to make people believe it, or do you start to think about what people believe and build on that to a more grand scheme?
Actually, I'm really glad you asked that because, one, if there was a real sci-fi narrator, they'd be like, "You don't write sci-fi. This isn't based on real science." But on a bookshelf, in a store, it would go there. I gave up on, I write lasers and robots for certain reasons. Quick example, I'll examine alcoholism and rage issues through a narrator who's died and become a zombie, that one has a...
Social sci-fi?
Yeah. On the blurb, Kaylee Jones called it magical realism. I hope it was Kaylee or she's going to be so mad at me. The idea is, and this is not really spoilers for the book, Scott, the second Scott shows up very quickly. It's after the inciting incident, it's 8 pages in.
Yeah, you justify the existence after the existence of the paranormal.
Yeah, it's really not about how did this other Scott appear, although they do try to figure it out. It's more about what happens to the characters afterwards. There's this catalyst, and I like to choose unusual catalysts, and then see where the characters go. Scott sees his life being stolen in a way that he thinks he wants.
But if yours is categorized as sci-fi, doesn't it worry you that a lot of science fiction writers tend to be more about the probability of something extraordinary happening as opposed to using it as a catalyst for the psychology of how the actors would behave afterward?
No, because I don't participate on any forums or message boards, so it's hard to troll me. But I'm actually glad you asked that because some of the things I wrote a story where a black hole opens up in the sky, and you never find out how or why. And the story is about the morality of suicide and the inevitability of death. But hopefully, if I do it correctly, people aren't stop thinking about the black hole or where Scott came from. Did that answer your question?
I have a question on the self-publishing, particularly for Judy. And is yours self-published or?
I created my own project.
Well, that was kind of interesting because I haven't researched it, but I imagine you got this book, you don't have a publisher agent who's going to sell it to you. You do it yourself. You've got these ready-made, iUniverse and all these various places you can send off, depending on quality. But to actually create your own print, control the quality, to hire the art directors, what is that? Maybe, I don't think it'd be quite interesting. How do you create your own print? You want to go first? You go.
The way I did it was, it just kind of kept rolling because I was writing a novel and my really good friend who's a painter and illustrator, we would hang out constantly, talk about our work back and forth, and give each other feedback from a different world. So I would give him feedback in art and illustration where I don't have that technical art and illustration background. So he's getting that audience. And he's not taking classes, at MFA, so he's giving me feedback from that side, from an illustrator through my writing. And he would start drawing sketches up, and then we started rolling like, you know how to do all this, I know how to do all that. And I know people who can edit, why don't we just all put it together? So this was our first project to see how that would work. We're thinking of doing about 1 to 3 works projects a year from now on. See how it goes.
Piggyback on that question, can I ask you what the rollout plan is? Like what, I think making the book is the first part and then getting it out there is the second? This is to Michael.
Oh, so like marketing and whatnot?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the plan. You just gotta like talk to people. It's a lot of footwork, and now with online, which I felt my novel isn't basically. I found it that my novel is not really set up for blog in the blogosphere because it's literary fiction, and that's not really what blogging has caught on to yet. So I've kind of steered away towards that since I thought I would put all my effort into like more footwork and groundwork and that aspect of it.
I'm just curious what that looks like.
What?
The footwork and
Just going to like stores around in neighborhoods and setting up consignments.
Yes.
Judy, did you get to know the sister that you never met better by writing about her?
I think I did. Especially since I kept asking my other sister, who was alive while I was writing this, but then passed away shortly when I was publishing. I kept asking her questions, and she, although she didn't remember her either, she knew more because she was older and she had heard more. And I did feel a connection doing the book, which was nice. It was a nice byproduct.
Following up on that, how much scholarly historic research did you do on it? Obviously, there'd be newspaper clippings or something, and then there's talking to your sister, that's your sister. Did you go back and talk to first responders, or what kind of research did you do?
A lot of it was newspapers. I went back into archives. I went back to the town where the accident happened, to the actual scene where it happened to see what it looked like. When we went there, actually, the mailman actually remembered the accident and knew some people that were still living on the block that remembered the accident. I did a lot of research around the plane crash because that fascinated me. I wanted to know exactly what happened to that plane. So the FAA reports, I was able to dig those up. I found one post done by the daughter of the pilot, which was really fascinating. And that's when I found out that the pilot lived around the corner from my parents, actually, and saw the plane go down. And actually, she was pregnant and lost the child because of that.
She saw her father.
And this was all new information for me to find out, and it was just devastating.
She saw her father's plane go down?
Her mother saw the plane go down, which, that kind of research was, changed my whole view of the whole thing. So that's the kind of research that I did. I did talk to one of the firemen that was in the firehouse that fought the flames. He sent me some pictures, which was great. So that was mostly.
Are you sending these people this book? Do you care to get these cards?
Oh, am I sending to?
The firemen and
I sent the first book to the firemen. I need to send them another one. Thank you. I need to do that.
Let's hear for all these wonderful.
Our wonderful mobile bookseller 192 Books has all of their books on sale at a little table over there. It's Kate. She's our rescuer this year as the other mobile bookseller went out of business. So please support these artists and the book business and buy a book. Also, yeah, and they'll sign them. And also there's a reception next door at Vino in after the book signing. So see you there.
I can't wait to read it, because it's been a long time, especially because they took our internet version online. Yeah, they pulled it, so since they took our, it's like, what is it, yeah, we can never read it, because I'll wait until